Hi, everyone. I'm Jon Leiberman, and this is I'm Thinking Of, the show where we talk about all of the hottest topics in B2B. And on this episode, I'm thinking of ad strategy best practices. And there is no one better to talk about this than Jennifer Hughes, the Director of Digital Marketing at Demandbase. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm good, Jon. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. Look, coming up with an account-based strategy can seem daunting. It can seem complex, maybe expensive. Where do you even start?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So, as with any strategy, right, you want to define your goal, the goal that's driving it. And because once the goal is defined, then it's a matter of turning it into a series of kind of like manageable objectives, right? So, in the case of an account-based strategy for digital marketing, the goal is actually pretty simple. And that is to target the right account, offer them the right content at the right time. Now, we all know that behind that is a more complex set of goals in terms of revenue growth and, retention and all of these things. But at the heart of it for digital marketing, it's the right account, the right content at the right time. And it's a very customer centric approach to ABM. But by staying really consistent to this pretty simple strategic approach, you're taking out what used to be, frankly, a bunch of guesswork on the part of marketing to try to reach the right account when you want to reach them with what you should be showing them. So you're taking the guesswork out of that. So once you know that, it's kind of the question becomes what does it look like, right? So we have the goal, but what does it look like in terms of building the actual strategy? And I think of it as a recipe with those three ingredients. So first you find the right accounts. Secondly, you make sure you're serving them up the content. And then you need to be offering it at the right time, right when they need to see it. So if you're starting with accounts, I like to think of the account prioritization pyramid, which we've all seen, that sort of iconic ABM, the strategic accounts at the top, maybe the top or big bets in the middle, and, on down in importance. And I think of that pyramid almost as like the plumb line of this digital marketing strategy, because the plumb line, right, is a weight with a string that's suspended. And the point of it is it keeps the whole structure centered. So part of why that's so critical is because just in aligning on that, sales and marketing have to have some really big, important connections and conversations. And what that ends up necessitating is this sort of open back and forth between sales and marketing that is the biggest indicator for success in these digital campaigns. So that's why it's so critical to get that part right. And it's not just which accounts, it's the why, right? Why are these accounts the ones important? So that's where you're thinking of things like, data on one side where it's the size of the company, the number of the employees, the revenue, the location, and then there's also really critical intelligence that's going to go into that too. So this is things like intent data, length of sales cycle, marketing engagement, things like that. And all of these things come together in this conversation between sales and marketing. And that's where the alignment comes from. That's so critical, that starts out this whole process. So once you set all those accounts by priority, the next part, very critical, is the content. So you might not be surprised to know that I like to map the content out by buyer's journey. And so by doing that, so if you can imagine, I have a content map I use, and on the left is all the assets, and across the top is the different stages of the buyer's journey. And there's this kind of nice flow. And so that's not only useful to make sure all the content is mapped evenly across, dispersed across the different stages. It also has the nice benefit of highlighting any gaps, which can then help inform, the content team or the product team in future decisions around content creation. So once you have those two pieces in place, the account prioritization and the content mapped out by journey, the third ingredient is the time. So I'll say that none of these ingredients is more or less important than the other, because we couldn't do any of this without all three. But I will say that even if you do the first two steps completely correctly, if you are not doing this step of the right time correctly, you've wasted your time in the whole exercise, right? Because there's a reason that we call it the buyer's journey. And that's because the journey is so often used metaphorically, right? I mean, we all remember like the hero's journey from high school English, but it's an up and down, right? There's an emotional aspect to it. There's a being pulled in and engaged. There's almost a resistance to it, and then there's the movement into, oh gosh, I think we're going to, get to a transition place where they're going to be all in for the adventure. And it's just all like that, right? So are we going to get them over the NQA threshold? And then comes all the testing and the transformation. But anyway, there's a reason we refer to it that way. And it's because there's content that you can show along the steps of that journey that would be utterly inappropriate at the right time. And the problem is, if you show them that wrong content at the wrong time, you're not only possibly losing them, you're also disrespecting them, right? This journey is big and scary. They're in a company that's trying to find some product or solution that's speaking to a big pain point for them. And you need to kind of respect the journey and try to help them out along the way, doing it on their time.
So let me ask you this. I know that you get this question a lot. How do you decide how and how much to spend on digital campaigns?
Right. Yeah, this is on its face also rather daunting, but I have good news. It's only daunting until you realize that by constructing your digital strategy the way that you did, you already have all the answers that you need. So in other words, if you think of the digital spend and effort that you're putting in per account, it's almost like an upside down version of the pyramid on top of the account prioritization pyramid. So effectively, then, of course, as the accounts become more and more important as you go up the pyramid, so does the percentage of digital spend and effort, and therefore reach. And this is another example of you're just kind of taking the guesswork out of what you have to do. At that point, it's a percentage. It's a calculation of relative spend as to, however your company may end up doing its account tiering. The decisions around those prioritizations have already been made. So it's sticking it into a formula, if that makes sense. And this is just incredible because, in the past, it's just sort of been like, oh, well, gosh, I don't know, put them all in a big group and show them all the content and spend all the money in one fell swoop at the same time and hope for the best. And that's the antithesis of what we want to be doing. So if we can approach it with this tiered perspective for spend and effort, then we end up having that, mirror the importance of the account to the company.
What are the best ways to kind of execute on the strategy across all digital channels?
Yeah, so this is a great question, but again, I have good news. So the importance of the strategy is, huge, but just as important is the ability to reinforce it, right, and mirror it across all the internal and external channels. Because if you don't do that, then you're not maintaining that integrity of the campaign structure, which is so critical. So the best place to start with this, in terms of best practices, is within Demandbase 1 advertising. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Not the least of which is the account list segmentation and audience building capabilities. So think of what you're doing, right? You're creating segmented account lists and you're building these audiences with in the same place, right, where you have access to all the data, all the intelligence, and all the insights that Demandbase One offers all in one place. And by building the audiences in there that you're later going to take out to these external digital channels as well, you're making sure that your strategy is consistent, effective, and this is really, really critical because I know there's a lot of very strapped marketing teams out there, scalable. This makes not only executing on the strategy scalable, it makes reporting on the strategy scalable. This is really key. So when you're looking at your ROI, you're actually looking at your ROI, because if you're using the same audience across all the channels, then when you're looking at the results in Demandbase One site analytics, this is truly apples to apples. I know we use that expression all the time, but this really is it. And so this allows for the agility to change where needed. And then when we do make those changes, it's made across all the channels because we're using the same audiences. So it's just, the scalability is a huge appeal, obviously.
So speaking of scalability, there's been a lot of talk around leveraging Demandbase One on LinkedIn campaigns. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
I sure can. This is one of my favorite topics. And that is because I spent years before I came to Demandbase managing campaigns in LinkedIn Campaign Manager. And it can be a very finicky, inflexible system because there's a lot of time around having to update audiences and very, very inflexible of requirements around targeting, et cetera, waiting periods for audiences. And so, LinkedIn is something that every company does. I mean, you absolutely have to do it. It is, it is an incredible way to network and all of it. But until Demandbase One, I never could find that sweet spot of actually having a truly account-based approach in LinkedIn. So when I joined Demandbase and learned about being able to leverage Demandbase orchestration and sync dynamic audiences over to LinkedIn, I was like a kid in a candy store. I went in and I created, I'm not kidding, 65 audiences. I synced them all over at once. And I went into LinkedIn and I had this incredible flexibility, and I could make an audience of any size for any campaign. I didn't have any waiting periods. Anybody who has been in LinkedIn Campaign Manager knows what I'm talking about. And it changed LinkedIn for me as a digital marketer. What used to be impossible to have an account-based approach became, an account-based approach, just another arm on the ABX strategy.
Jennifer, are there ways to kind of mirror and reinforce an account-based strategy with paid search?
Yes. This is also a really great question, because on the face of it, you would think, well, of all the different digital channels, paid search can't be account-based. We're not targeting accounts per se. We're, using search, we're using keywords to try to capture people searching certain terms. What you can do though is you have all your target audiences, right, that you've built out in Demandbase One. And one of the ways that I've had a lot of success is if you can imagine the buyer's journey funnel, and the people putting the search into the Google bar are users from accounts across all stages of the buyer's journey. And what they're searching is answer to a question, a solution for a pain point they're having for their company. Maybe they're comparing vendors, or reading third-party credibility, and all of those things communicate and indicate what level of the buyer's journey stage they're in. And the first indicator of this is the actual search term they use, right? So if you can imagine an account that's qualified or possibly aware but not yet engaged, maybe they're not searching things like how can account-based marketing, help me? Or they're going to be leaning more towards, stalled revenue growth or B2B go-to-market, help, and things like that. Because they're not necessarily, if they're not aware or engaged yet, they may not know, the different terms and the industry labels that are used. And then you kind of go on down the funnel, right? So if they're actually searching, what's the difference between ABX and ABM? Well, that, it's pretty clear then where they are in that funnel. They're already engaged or MQA. They may even have an opportunity. But the point is, you can, by choosing the keywords and phrases to pull those kinds of searches in and then point them to exactly the right content to meet it, you're completely staying true to the integrity of that account-based approach within paid search.
Now, what about the mirroring and reinforcing when it comes to content syndication?
Yeah, this is a good one too. And I'm imagining all the marketers out there, because there's always a moment where marketers are like, content syndication, because you're always trying to get buy-in from the reps, because, it's all understandable. I call them, they never have heard of it, so it can be a little bit of a struggle. Sometimes you're like, is it even worth it? It is worth it for several different reasons. One is that, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but you are using the same audiences. So the same audiences that you're breaking down by journey stage and all the other campaigns, you're doing in content syndication. And it's especially nice in content syndication because obviously you want to set up a nurture program, an autoresponder email program for any content syndication leads coming in. And with that, you already have beautifully mapped out exactly what content to send them next. And by what they've downloaded, what they need to know next. So that's already in place. That's just made for content syndication, frankly. But also content syndication can be used as an intelligence tool. Really, at the end of the day, it's you're getting the leads in, which is great. You're also gathering information about the account itself, right? So, a lead here and there from here and there. But when you look at it as a whole, oh, wow, that account in the last week had 4 people that we consider decision makers downloading third-party content about our product and solution. That's gold, right? That's just another data point in the intelligence. So I always encourage, don't think of it as it's only lead generating, top of the funnel. There are lots of ways to use content syndication to further the account-based model.
Fascinating stuff. Jennifer Hughes, Director of Digital Marketing for Demandbase. Jennifer, thanks so much for your insight.
Of course, anytime. Thanks for having me.